Welcome to today's Digital Lounge. I'm Mark, and in this bite-sized episode, we're exploring why simply being efficient with data and collecting data is no longer enough, and how organizations can unlock real growth through insight-led strategies. Every business today is swimming in data, but as Crimson's Chief Data Officer, Ian Bobbett, points out, having data isn't the same as using it. Many organizations are data rich, but insight poor, missing the opportunity to turn information into action. So, how do you go beyond dashboards and reports to build a culture where data becomes a genuine growth engine? That's exactly what we'll be digging into with Ian today. And Ian's with me now. Ian, lovely to see you again.
You
Um,
too.
yes, so it's an interesting topic, Ian, and I know that you've written on our blog recently about turning data into that strategic growth driver. Um, so from data rich to insight poor, you say most organizations are data rich but insight poor. What's, in your opinion, the first step leaders should take to break out of that trap that so many seem to be in and start creating real real value from their data?
Yeah, it's. I suppose that's not the most simple of questions, and we should appreciate that it's really difficult for businesses to take this first step. There are a lot of businesses that have gone down this path before; they've struggled, and putting structure around it is probably the most important thing that I'd say. The context of where a lot of businesses start is that they have a significant number of data in silos. That data might be very rich or it might be poor quality, but they the silos support operations but don't necessarily inform the wider business. So the consequence of that is that often businesses are operating with disjointed reporting. They have no 360-degree view of their business. They don't really understand what the business as a whole looks like in terms of its data, how it's operating. That kind of leads to potentially some quite significant issues. You kind of people try to solve it by throwing their data into one place and building a data platform. That's the right thing to do, but that has to be underpinned by really clear purpose. I'd say the purpose is the most important thing, to know why you're going to put your data into one place and invest in a data platform potentially. And that purpose is in my world anyway, tends to be driven by use cases. So we have a clear understanding of the potential value that bringing data together will bring. We understand how we're going to activate that in a business. And knowing that before you go down that investment route is really critical, because then you can make good, clear decisions as to why a data platform is really important and how it's going to benefit your business.
Thank you, Ian. And I think that touches on another really important factor. I think that you argue in your blog that data projects don't fail usually on technology, but on people. And in your view, what are some of the ways leaders can keep both senior stakeholders and end users engaged throughout a data transformation journey, Ian?
And you've kind of hit the nail on the head with that question, Mark. That I'll just to be clear, that statement is somewhat tongue in cheek, but observationally, I've seen it plenty of times. You often get solutions that have been implemented and are just not adopted, and that can be doubly the case with data. And I've seen it plenty of times across my career where businesses have invested quite heavily in data platforms, then they've put the same data back into the platform. They haven't changed their working behaviors. So we tend to talk about 4 pillars: technology, data and AI, people, and process. So they don't change those behaviors more holistically. and what you kind of get is a new data platform or new information coming out that people don't really know how to assimilate. It kind of comes up as a surprise. To avoid that, it's really important that you get adoption early on, and that's before you've built anything, to be honest. So what happens is you kind of get solutions that don't really align to how people on the ground work, or it doesn't have the information that they need to do their day-to-day job, so they find themselves flipping around systems, so that they naturally go back to the previous way they've always done it, right? There's nothing to compel them to change their ways. So the way to get around that is always making sure that your end users are part of that journey, in terms of defining what your use cases need to look like, how it's going to be activated in the business, because they need to feel like they're contributing. And by feeling that they're contributing, they will be more invested in the solution. There has to be really clear ownership of data, so someone needs to be accountable, and take responsibility for the quality of data, the security, the use. I've kind of mentioned it earlier in the frame of use cases. We need to understand how data is going to impact a business. So if your use cases are kind of, oh, we can do some more reporting, and there's not much value, I'd probably argue against doing it. But if there are significant opportunities that you can identify, and they have a clear use case, you understand the benefits, then that's going to be much more compelling. And probably the last thing I'd say, which can be quite tricky, is where possible you need to have a value exchange with your users. So in some way, the user's life has to be made slightly better by putting that kind of solution in. For example, they may be able to do parts of their jobs that were quite utilitarian, quite basic, in an automated way that allows them to focus on higher value tasks. So there needs to be a quid pro quo.
Very interesting. And I think just sort of building on that, you caution against treating data teams like order takers, delivering tools instead of solving problems. Can you share an example where reframing the brief around the business problem unlocked a bigger impact than the original request?
Yeah, I mean, data teams still need to take orders to a degree, but that order needs to be in the context of adding value to the business, or that there's a genuine business need to do so. So I'm not saying, I would never say get rid of all your dashboards, don't do any reporting. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are better, more forward-thinking ways of doing these kind of things. In terms of examples of maybe unlocking a wider business problem that gives greater impact, yes, there are lots of examples through my career where I've done that. But perhaps without naming names, I think maybe, Mark, we talk internally and with some of our customers about some of the thought exercises that we do. And one of my favourite ones that we do with data is around the UK police force. And the problem statement is there are not enough police officers. The reframing of that questions is, or that issue is, there are not enough police officers policing. Instead, they're investing too much of their time with administrative tasks and paperwork that perhaps in the modern world that we live in, they shouldn't really be doing. And the example that we give is, if you look at the process that a blue light incident might happen for the police, they get a call in, that call is recorded. But all of those recordings, that audio, that's data in my world. So that information can be used, it can be passed on to the team assisting in the call center might have a lot of information that comes up very quickly about the call. And for example, they may not give it to the closest unit. They might give it to another unit where they've been doing some community work and they're known to the people involved. You get all the metrics around the response, how quickly have they responded, what was their driving like, was it safe? And you get a lot of data sources for that kind of thing. When the officers arrive, there are dash cams in their cars, there are body cams, a lot of information is captured, stored, and from that, the capabilities already exist to automate a lot of the admin. So rather than getting more police, the question is, how do I get police to spend more time doing on the ground police work and lift the administrative burden via data and AI? So I think that's a very simple example, but that reframing of the question often helps businesses find and unlock advantages that perhaps they weren't aware of.
Thank you, Ian. And I appreciate we've not got a lot of time left, but I think I did want to ask you a question around how data transformation can feel like a leap of faith. And I know we talked a little bit about this at last year's innovation conference. For those people that weren't there, I mean, how would you recommend organizations demonstrate those quick wins without losing sight of that strategic direction?
It's not easy, is the honest truth. A lot of companies naturally feel nervous about doing this, and in particular, taking that monolithic approach, i.e., we'll do everything at the start. I don't generally recommend that unless businesses are very comfortable doing that. Data platforms tend to be a lot more flexible now, so we can take a much more domain-oriented approach. What that means is, in my head anyway, maybe not traditionally, but that means we've got really clear use cases that we know are going to deliver value. We understand how we're going to go about executing that in the real world, and it aligns to the business strategy. And because of that, we can then put in the data that's going to enable that in the first instance. You do have to keep an eye on that wider data strategy, but it's all about that speed to value, I suppose. So making sure that we've got good use cases, we understand the value potential of those use cases, and it lines to a wider business strategy, but also your data strategy. You do then get to a point where supply will create demand. So people will see good things happening with data and AI and will, ask, but that's the situation you want to be in. And I suppose the watch out that we discussed a bit in the innovation conference, Mark, was that needs to be underpinned by good security and governance. So, foundations are very, very important in this space.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, Ian, you lead the Crimson's data practice. We've talked a lot of the sort of the theory, I suppose, here today. But for those that aren't familiar, can you explain what the practice does and how it does help organisations with moving beyond reports and the kind of basic data collection we've talked about?
Yeah, so I've a lot of experience in the data sector and the AI sector, and I suppose our approach is built off years and years of observation. We tend to help our customers across their data journey, and that starts from defining your data strategy, and then helping you make sure you've got those strong data foundations in place, creating that single version of the truth so that businesses can operate with more confidence, and all of that sitting on a consolidated data platform. We underpin that. I just mentioned compliance and governance and security. We underpin that with the Crimson Trust framework, and that framework is designed to help us make sure that our customers are behaving ethically with their data, for example. And then via that approach, we make sure that we put in solutions that meet use cases that are going to deliver value. Whatever your value metric is, your value metric doesn't have to be financial. It might be a more socially oriented value metric. It could be colleague satisfaction. We kind of help define that as well, and finally making sure that when the solutions are put in place, they're activated correctly, people adopt them, and that kind of goes back to our 4-pillar premise of that people pillar being really important as well. So I suppose in summary, we help customers on their end-to-end data journey and put in AI and machine learning solutions that deliver palpable value.
Fantastic. Well, Ian, thank you as always for joining us on the Digital Lounge. We know that you're very busy, so we value your time here on the show, sharing your knowledge. And for those that haven't seen Ian's blog, I encourage you to go and check it out. It talks about how you can use data insights to drive strategic growth. So that's available on our website at the moment. And of course, if you're interested in speaking to Ian about your own data challenges, then you can find us at crimson.co.uk and just send your details to us, and we'll be back in touch with you. Just one little plug from me: we have the Crimson Innovation Conference on Thursday, the 13th of November in the West Midlands. We've got some exciting announcements to share with you over the next few weeks about who's speaking, but I'd encourage you to sign up to that as soon as possible. You'll find details of that on our website as well. That's it from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. We'll be back again soon with the Digital Lab.